Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Get ready for taxes. Get ready now to file 2020 federal income tax returns. IR 2020-256, November 17th, 2020, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today encourages taxpayers to take necessary actions this fall to help them file their federal tax returns timely and accurately in 2021, including special steps related to the economic impact payments, the EIP. So obviously the taxes for 2020 will be filed in 2021. That's coming up here, so we want to be ready to be filing the taxes. We have some special or a new kind of thing that we'll be dealing with for the 2020 taxes, which is going to be that economic impact payment, the EIP payment, which was sent out based on prior year information, 2019, 2018 typically, but it's kind of tied to the 2020 tax return, which won't be filed until 2021. So you want to make sure that you need any of the necessary documentation in order to deal with the economic impact payment, as well as if there was a problem with the payment, if we didn't get the full payment, for example, then you may be able to get that or get the difference or whatever needs to be done, take care of any problems with it, hopefully, with the 2020 tax filing that will be done in 2021. This is the first of a series of reminders to help taxpayers get ready for the upcoming tax filing season. A special page, there's a link to that special page here, updated and available on Irs.gov, outlines steps taxpayers can take now to prepare for the 2021 tax return filing season ahead. Steps taxpayers can take now to make tax filing easier in 2021. Taxpayers should gather Forms W-2, wage and tax statements, Form 1099, miscellaneous income, and other income tax documents to help determine if they're eligible for deductions or credits. So obviously you're going to have to pull together all your standard forms here. That's going to be the W-2 forms from work if you're an employer, from the employer if you are an employee. And more people probably this year have some form of 1099 type of income, possibly more gig works happening this year. People might have changed up jobs a little bit more this year. So if you have 1099 income or miscellaneous type of returns or tax documentation, you want to make sure that you compile that information as well and include it where it needs to be included. If you're if you had a Schedule C type of income or your own business or did some gig work this year or something like that, that would typically be on a Schedule C that you may have to include. So I would think that this year more people would have a small business or Schedule C possibly, as they may have picked up kind of other work and would then need to be filing a Schedule C possibly, and you might need the 1099 miscellaneous incomes, maybe something that are leading towards that. Obviously, any other kind of documentation you might have that would support any other types of deductions, you want to keep those on hand so you can both use them to prepare the tax return as well as use them to verify if there's any problems with the tax return or if there's an audit in the future. You want to make sure that you have that information gathered and ready in case that event happens. So they'll also need their notice 1444 for economic impact payment. There's a link to that here to calculate any recovery rebate credit they may be eligible for on their 2020 federal income tax return. Most income is taxable, including unemployment compensation, refund interest, and income from the gig economy and virtual currencies. So these are some of the new things that possibly more people are experiencing this year. More people might have unemployment compensation. You'll typically get some documentation related to that, and it will typically be taxable. Remember, from an IRS standpoint, anything that you get, if you're getting income, if you're getting money, if you're getting paid in some way, shape, or form, the IRS code is basically written, so it's considered income unless it says otherwise. So the idea on the IRS side is basically anything you get is considered income unless it falls under a category that says it would not be income, is kind of the mindset. And unemployment is something that will be income. Gig economy, so if you're working in the gig economy, picking up some side income in some way, but you're not an employee, then you should be reporting that. That'll typically be something that would be included, and you might have a business, a small business in that case, and that could be on a Schedule C. You might get 1099s related to it, but even if you don't, then you should be reporting any gig income on the Schedule C, and then virtual currencies as well. So taxpayers with an individual taxpayer identification number, an ITIN, there's a link to that here, should ensure it hasn't expired before they file their 2020 federal income tax return. If it has, IRS recommends they submit a Form W-7 application for IRS individual tax identification number. There's a link to that here now to renew their ITIN, their ITIN, ITIN. Taxpayers who fail to renew their ITIN before filing a tax return next year could face a delayed refund and may be ineligible for certain tax credits. Taxpayers can also use the tax withholding estimator on Irs.gov to help determine the right amount of tax to have withheld from their paychecks. This could be a really nice tool. It can be more and more difficult to determine exactly how much you need to be paying to the IRS during the year, because the IRS wants to be paid during the year. So for 2020, they want to be paid during 2020. They don't want to be paid in 2021. However, of course, we don't know how much to pay them until we actually do the tax return, because the tax return is way too complex to actually know how much is going to be due. So all you can do is basically do an estimate, and that's what happens when you have a withholding out of your W-2 income. It's just basically an estimate of how much tax you owe in 2020 as you earn it, so the IRS can take what they want, during the year rather than at the end of the year. But it becomes more and more difficult as people change from job to job and whatnot, and you have multiple people working in the same household instead of like a one-income household, which would be much more simple to calculate a kind of estimate. Becomes much more complicated, and so you basically need software to project out what your tax return will be. You need to do a projection, which can be a little bit more complex type of calculation these days. And this tax withholding estimator is getting better and better at being able to take in the multiple pieces of data from say multiple jobs you might have, or say business income, and you have work income, and you have multiple people in the home that are working, and you're married filing joint, so you could have multiple jobs that are going to be reported on the same tax return. So it's getting better to do that kind of projection, so then you could think about, well, how much withholdings do I have to take under those circumstances, and or how many payments do I have to make if you have a small business. So it's worth taking a look at that. If you need to do withholdings at this point in time, it's late in the year right now, but you may still be able to avoid penalties and interest if you needed to increase the withholdings for the last month or so last couple months, and then you want to adjust it again in 2021, so that it'll have the withholdings that it needs to be standardized for the entire year to not owe any taxes or penalties and interest at the end of the year. So back to the text. If they need to adjust their withholdings for the rest of the year time is running out, they should submit a new W-4 employee withholding certificate. There's a link to that here, to their employer as soon as possible. And note again, there's a tendency when you do the W-4 to go ask your employer and say, well, can you give me some advice on this W-4 and whatnot? And most employers, especially at a big company, are going to say, no, I can't give you any advice, because the HR is not going to give tax advice because they don't want to get sued, right? So you have to go talk to your CPA and or use your tax withholding estimator to determine what the withholdings should be. Then just ask the human resources for the Form W-4 so that you can fill it out and provide it back to them. They will be typically quite good in terms of the logistics of just giving you the information and inputting the information, but they typically will not provide any more kind of anything that could possibly be tax advice. Okay, taxpayers should receive non-wage income like self-employment income, investment income, taxable Social Security benefits, and in some instances, pension and annuity income may have to make estimated tax payments. There's a link to the estimated tax payments here. Payment options can be found on Irs.gov/payments. There's a link to that here. New in 2021, those who didn't receive an EIP, economic impact payment, may be able to claim the Recovery Rebate Credit. So this is something, of course, different for 2020, filing in 2021 than in prior years, because the economic income payment was based on, they sent it out looking at 2019 and 2018 tax returns, but it's basically tied to 2020. And if there's any problems with that economic impact payment, then it needs to be addressed with the 2020 tax return filed in 2021. So taxpayers may be able to claim the Recovery Rebate Credit if they met the eligibility criteria in 2020. There's a link to the eligibility criteria here, and they didn't receive an economic impact payment this year, or the economic payment was less than $1,200, $2,400 if married filing jointly for 2019 or 2018, plus $500 for each qualifying child. For additional information about the economic impact payment, taxpayers can visit Economic Impact Payment Information Center. So these are the common kind of problems. You might, if you didn't get the full payment, meaning the full payment for an individual would typically be $1,200, but if married, it would be $2,400. So if you didn't get that payment for whatever reason, the IRS didn't pick it up for some reason, then you should be able to pick it up on the 2020 tax return. The other problem that was common is that possibly they didn't pick up the qualifying child for whatever reason, for the plus $500 per qualifying child, and that's something that then can be adjusted or fixed possibly in the 2020 filing, which happens in 2021. Received interest on the federal tax refund. Remember, these are taxable include when filing. Taxpayers who receive a federal tax refund in 2020 may have been paid interest. The IRS sent interest payments to individual taxpayers who timely filed their 2019 federal income tax returns and received refunds. Most interest payments were received separately from tax refunds. Interest payments are taxable and must be reported on 2020 federal income tax returns. So interest, even if it's from the IRS, is basically like an investment, so they see it as investment interest. So they had to send out a bunch of stuff, and they gave investment interest because of the difference in the filing dates and the due dates that were adjusted this year. More people got some interest payments. They're typically not going to be a large interest payments for most people from the IRS, but they got some interest payments, and the IRS is saying those are taxable interest, just like if it was on a bank or something like that. So the interest is going to be taxable. So in January 2020, the IRS will send a Form 1099 interest income to anyone who received interest totaling at least $10. So you're going to get a 1099 from the IRS if you got interest, which many people did because of the shifting of the filing deadlines, and you got to include the interest on the tax return. So although the IRS issued most refunds in less than 21 days, the IRS cautions taxpayers not to rely on receiving their 2020 federal tax refund by a certain date, especially when making major purchases or paying bills. So they're basically saying they're going to try to get the refunds out timely, but you don't want to start spending money before you get the refund, because obviously if there is a problem with the IRS, if it gets held up for some reason, then it could take a long time to get it unstuck or unheld up. So I wouldn't trust I would look to see how long it would take, but I wouldn't really trust the money being there until it's there, really, if you're talking about like a refund. So some returns may require additional review and may take longer. EITC, ECTC related refunds should be available by first week of March. By law, the IRS cannot issue refunds for people claiming the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC, or Additional Child Tax Credit, ECTC, before mid-February. So these are going to be types of credits that are refundable credits, meaning like the credit could actually be going below the taxes, meaning it would result in not simply a refund, but actually getting money back beyond the taxes that were put into the system. So the common two refundable credits are the Earned Income Credit and the Child Tax Credit. So the law requires the IRS to hold the entire refund, even the portion not associated with EITC or ACTC. The IRS expects most EITC, ACTC related refunds to be available in taxpayer bank accounts or on debit cards by the first week of March if they choose direct deposit and there are no other issues with their tax return. Taxpayers should use Where's My Refund? There's a link to that here for their professional refund, for their personalized refund date. So you can track what the refund date will be using that tool. The social distancing continuing, taxpayers can stay home and stay safe with Irs Online Tools. Taxpayers can find online tools and resources. There's a link to those tools and resources here to help get the information they need. The Irs.gov tools are easy to use and available 24 hours a day. Millions of people use them to find information about their accounts, get answers to tax questions, or file and pay their taxes. Almost everyone can file electronically for free. The IRS Free File program, there's a link to that here, available only through Irs.gov or the Irs.to-go app, offers brand name tax preparation software packages at no cost. The software does all the work of finding deductions, credits, and exemptions for you. It's free for those who earned $72,000 or less in 2020. Some of the free file packages also offer free state tax return preparation. So that's going to be a great tool. You can take a look at the free tax software and see if that will be something applicable to you. The state tax return is something that's often a factor. So if you're picking up the IRS or getting the information from the IRS, remember that you're basically looking at the federal side of things. You will typically want to file your tax returns for the Fed and the state if you have to file for the state. At the same time, it would be really nice if the software would be picking up the state that you are in as well, because that'll simplify the process typically for the data input for tax preparation. If you're comfortable filling out your own tax forms electronically, you can use free file fillable forms regardless of your income to file your tax return either by mail or online. That's a little bit more difficult to use, the free file fillable forms. Great for practice because you got to actually read through line by line the actual tax returns, but it's really nice to have the software that's going to help guide you, because the software most times will give you basically an interview type process to help you fill out the form. The software then doing the data input, a lot of times that will put the manual box by box type of transactions. But you can do the fillable forms, and there's instructions and the forms available on the website, and so it's all there for you to take a look at. Taxpayers have several options to find a tax preparer. One resource is Choosing a Tax Professional, which offers a wealth of information for selecting a tax professional. There's a link to the Choosing a Tax Professional here. The Directory of Federal Tax Return Preparers with credentials and select qualifications, there's a link to that here, can help taxpayers find preparers in their area who currently hold a professional credentials recognized by the IRS, or who hold an annual filing season program record of completion. Taxpayers can use the Interactive Tax Assistance, ITA, there's a link to that here, beginning in January 2021 to get answers to a number of tax law questions. The ITA can help determine if a type of income is taxable, if someone is eligible to claim a certain credit, or if they can deduct expenses on their tax return. The taxpayer can check status of their refund using Where's My Refund. There's a link to that here. The status is available within 24 hours after the IRS receives their e-file tax return, or up to 4 weeks if after they mailed a paper tax return. The Where's My Refund tool updates once every 24 hours, usually overnight, so taxpayers only need to check once a day. The best and fastest way for taxpayers to get their tax refund is to have it direct deposited. So they have a link to the direct deposit here into their financial account. So if you're getting a refund, and you might want to set up the direct deposit information, most tax software will have the ability to do that, and that way you'll get your money faster. Taxpayers who don't have a financial account can visit the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC website. There's a link to that here for information to help open an account online. Taxpayers are invited to join the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance and Tax Counseling for Elderly, VITA/TCE programs. VITA/TCE volunteers receive training to provide free tax return preparation for eligible taxpayers. There's never been a better time to get ready to help others file, and the IRS is rolling out new ways to make volunteering easier. Visit Irs.gov/volunteers to learn more. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.